What's going on, guys? Zuco back with another Shadowlands video. How's everybody doing? We got our coffee. Look at this. I got a new mug. I'll show you my. I know I got the Twitch mug. I'm very happy with the Twitch mug. But look at this thing. It's like a fox. This is like a white silver fox or something. It's so cool. I actually love this one. It's a good mug. How was everybody's Christmas? I hope you had a good Christmas. I hope you got lots of presents. I hope everybody treated you well. And you got to share some time off from work, maybe with the family, all that stuff. My family's down right now. We're all just kind of hanging out. I'm gonna head over there when I'm done this video, actually. But I wanted to get this out for you guys. What are we doing today? I'm starting a new series, and we're calling it Dungeon Dynamics. And what I want to talk about primarily is about Mythic Plus, and I want to talk about every single facet of Mythic Plus when it comes to your character when you're in the dungeons. We're not just talking about damage, but I'm talking about what can you contribute as a shaman. We're going to start with shaman, but I'm actually going to go and do other classes as well. We're going to do druid, we're going to do I think some death knight stuff later, and some survival hunter. I want to talk about all of these dungeons when you're doing Mythic Plus runs in particular. I'm going to talk a little bit about Raid, but this is primarily focused on Mythic Plus. How can you contribute to your team, the success of your team, and how can you make how can you push yourself into those higher keys, right? I want to analyze and discuss like all the facets that encompass Mythic Plus, this whole Mythic Plus experience. And I want to kind of help us to shape a perspective, maybe a new perspective for some of you, I don't know, but I want to help to shape a perspective here on what it means to perform well in a Mythic Plus, but also what it means to have fun. And sometimes I think we get lost when we're playing this game a little bit, and it's like we're not really having fun because we're so focused on the performance side of things, on making sure that our damage numbers are the highest that they could possibly be, or our healing numbers are the highest they could possibly be, when there's actually so many more little micro decisions that you make in a dungeon that will cause your team to be successful or not. So we are going to take a look at all of those. Excuse me, and we're going to start with Enhancement Shaman because that's what I'm playing right now. That's really kind of that's become like my main in the game now. Now I don't know if I've said this on stream before, but this isn't my main. This wasn't my main like a few months ago when I was raiding with my guild. So I'm in a guild here, and we primarily did raiding, and we didn't really touch on Mythic Plus as much when we were doing the full raiding. So we raided Sanctum of Domination most recently, but we also raided Castle Nathria, and we actually got ahead of the curve on Sylvanas, which you can see here, which is very cool. We got ahead of the curve on Sire Denathrius as well, so we are a heroic level, raiding guild. We've got some people who really could push into mythic, but for now we've just decided as a group to do some heroic stuff. And on top of that, we most recently got the Keystone Master for this. We got the over 2,000 rating. I got it on my Paladin, which is my main. I was the main tank of our guild, but I just wanted to show you guys that we actually went and got this achievement recently with my another part of my raid group. We sort of formed up and created a Mythic Plus group, and we pounded out all those 15s, right? And this achievement was much harder to get this year than I think it was in the previous years. But I'm going to show clips from the video of us doing our last Mythic Plus dungeon before we got the achievement. And I'm going to use that dungeon. I'm going to play some of that footage so that when I'm just talking about the mechanics of dungeons and stuff, you have something to look at, and I'm going to comment a little bit on it as well. But just know that I'm the paladin in this video that you're going to be seeing, and I didn't do it on my shaman, right? I did all those dungeons on my paladin because that's just the way that I was set up at the time, and that was my main. I had the most gear on that guy, so my Shaman has been one of my favorite alts to play, and moving into the next tier, moving into 9.2, I will be playing Shaman, I believe, Enhancement Shaman in our raid group. So this is why I'm gearing it up now, and I'm getting all these trinkets that I've been chasing for a while, and we're kind of focusing really heavily on the Shaman. But in the video, for context, you're going to see that I'm the tank paladin, the prop paladin in there. So, but yeah, just so you know, I've got some of those things under my belt, and I've done quite a few Mythic Plus runs at this point, and what I really want to focus on for Shaman is we're going to talk about part one. I'm going to talk about our DPS cooldowns and usage. How do we use our DPS cooldowns? and when should we use them in a dungeon? What makes the most sense that way? Second, we are going to talk about um, our shaman kick, which is like the best kick in the game, and I'll get back to that more. We're gonna talk a little bit about survivability for Shaman. If you're doing Mythic Plus keys with your buddies or with a pug group, how can you survive? Because honestly, Shaman is one of the weaker classes when it comes to just having straight up damage mitigation. We only have one wall with Astral Shift, so I'll talk a little bit more about survivability in a minute, and then we're gonna finish with our utility. And the utility on Enhancement Shaman, guys. I mean, on Shaman in general, the utility is just like off the charts. We have so much in our tool belt that we can use to help create a successful run for our Mythic Plus team. And I really want to keep emphasizing that idea that when you're getting into a Mythic Plus group, and in particular, as you push higher into Mythic Plus keys, if you start getting into 15, 17, 19, plus 20 keys, and you know some of the best Mythic Plus people right now are doing like plus 25 keys, like it's just crazy, right? And even higher than that. But for the average player, for you and me, let's say we're pushing into really high keys, like 18, 19s, 17, stuff like that, it starts to become incredibly important what you're doing for your group, not just what you're doing for yourself. And you have to think of it that way. You have to think about what can I bring on my enhancement shaman in this group to help us be successful. Sometimes that means pumping damage, as much damage as possible. Sometimes it means taking a strange talent that you might not normally take. Maybe you're going to take static charge instead of spirit wolf. That's pretty uncommon, but maybe there's a very specific reason that you want capacitor totem back up 20 seconds earlier than normal. Maybe you're going to take windrush totem instead of pharaoh lunge. Probably as you get into the higher keys, the really, really high keys, you're going to take Nature's Guardian. But these are all choices that we're going to talk about in this video. We're not going to focus so much on the damage stuff because we already have talked a lot about that and what we're doing for different damage builds. I want to focus on the nitty gritty, the little choices that you can make for your group. Windrush Totem, Pharaoh Lunge, Nature's Guardian, Earth Shield maybe, Static Charge. These are choices that you can make for your group to help them be more successful. And these are just the talents. There's a lot of other things within the talent within the Shaman kit that I want to talk about. So let me switch over to the dungeon really quick, and I'm just gonna get the footage going. I'm gonna actually mute it there, but we will. Yeah, hold on, let me just put this over here. We're gonna actually I'm gonna pull this out to here, and I'm gonna pull the rest of this over here. Okay, we got it. We got it. So here's what I want to look at here. We are approaching the first boss. We're just doing one of the tormentors. This is the fire tormentor guy. Obviously, you guys can see. So what I want to talk about really quickly, I'm just going to pause this here, is you want to look at um, your cooldowns. We're going to talk first and foremost about. Oh, I'm on the wrong thing. Sorry, guys. That was the awards that we did. We had a little award ceremony for our Mythic Plus group, which was really cool. Here, we'll put this back here. There we go. There we go. We got it. So before I continue with the video, we're going to talk about DPS cooldowns primarily right now. That's like the first thing that I want to touch on. And when it comes to, let me just talk about each covenant ability really, really quickly. So what we're looking at is if you're playing Kyrian, let's say, we know that you're going to get Vesper Totem and you're primarily going to take Mechanicos. The reason you take Mechanicos is because in the final tier of Mechanicos, you get the reduction. Let's just go here. I'll just show you really quick. If you guys don't know, you go Kyrian, we're going to go Shaman, you get Vesper Totem, and then you're going to get this on Mechanicos. So it reduces the cooldown of Vesper Totem by up to 20 seconds. Look at the bottom lines there of that thing. If you hit 4 or more targets, it reduces the cooldown of Vesper Totem by 20 seconds. It's insane in Mythic Plus. It's so good. When it comes to how to use it in a Mythic Plus environment, you just use Vesper Totem on cooldown. Always use it on cooldown. Just keep pressing this button over and over and over again. Even if you're approaching the last pack of right before a boss fight, you want to be using that cooldown. Here's the typical strategy that you want to try and employ when you're using cooldowns in a Mythic Plus environment. Use all of your cooldowns as much as you possibly can until it's time for the boss fight, and then you have to make sure that your cooldowns are up for the boss fight. So for some of the longer cooldowns, like Ascendance, you have to be kind of careful when you use them. If I was doing this Plague Fall that I'm going to show you guys, I might use Ascendance right off the bat on the very, very first pull of the dungeon that we do, because by the time we get through the rest of the trash, excuse me, and get to the first boss, I will have Ascendance back up again. You need to start thinking about it in that mindset. How do I use my cooldown so that I'm using them all the time? Because if they're off cooldown and you're not using them, you're probably wasting them. Unless you're holding them for a very particular thing, like, hey, we're 10 seconds away from a boss fight, so I'm going to hold my Ascendance. When it comes to Vesper Totem, just use it all the time. It will come back. It comes back so quickly, you won't even notice that it's gone. Okay, if you're playing Necrolord, we've got obviously Primordial Wave. Primordial Wave is obviously one of the outliers. We don't really play it as Enhancement Shaman, but if you are playing it, you're doing the fire build with Primal Lava Actuators, and you need to press Primordial Wave on cooldown, and you need to make sure that you're spreading those extra flame shocks. If you get a reset on Primordial Wave, you must press your Lightning Bolt before you press Primordial Wave again. Never, ever, 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 ever Primordial Wave 2 times in a row, or else you've wasted the Cleave Lightning Bolt, okay? But Primordial Wave, in terms of when to use it, just use it on cooldown. For Night Fae, we've got Fae Transfusion, right? Sorry, guys, my throat's all messed up here. There we go. Fae Transfusion is, if you take the conduit for it, it's about a 1.5 minute cooldown, right? There's a conduit that reduces the cooldown of it. This is basically a use on cooldown ability as well, except the only stipulation with Fae Transfusion is that you need to think about what abilities do you have to use after you press Fae Transfusion? What is ready to go? Do you have your full DPS package ready to go? Because you should be running Naya, and she's going to give you 400 mastery, right? With Grove Invigoration, you get 25 mastery, and you get 16 stacks. That's 400 mastery from pressing Fae Transfusion. So it's important to understand that this is going to give you a massive DPS boost after you use this, so make sure you have cooldowns ready to go. Pair this up with things like Ascendance. Pair this up with things like Doomwins, if you're running the Doomwins build, right? You want to do your full Fae Transfusion channel and then press Doomwins, and then you just go, right? And then press Ascendance as well, because you'll be doing extra damage from even your auto attacks, and your wind strikes will be doing just crazy amounts of damage. So try to pair this up with all your other DPS cooldowns that are ready to go, your Spirit Wolves, etc. Okay? Excuse me, once again. Then here's the last one that we're going to look at. Chain Harvest. The cooldown of Chain Harvest is about 1 minute to a minute and a half, right? The base cooldown is a minute and a half, but if you get crits, it goes down to about a minute. I think on average, you're going to see Chain Harvest be about a 1 minute cooldown, maybe a minute and 10 seconds. That's on average what you're going to get out of it. So it is something that you should also use basically on cooldown. The only stipulation here for Chain Harvest is that if you're running an extremely high Mythic Plus key for us, which would be something like an 18 or a 20 would be like really high, your team, you might want to save this for the first, like, for a little bit of time. So you start a pull, and obviously you only ever want to use this when you have 5 stacks of Maelstrom weapon ready to go, because Chain Harvest benefits from your Maelstrom weapon stacks, right? So don't ever use this outside of that. But you might not want to use it like as soon as you get your first 5 stacks of Maelstrom weapon, because if there's a huge amount of damage that's going to be coming in from an enemy, maybe you just hold it for like 10 seconds and then use it once all that damage has come through. You can really help your team if you make decisions like this, because this will full heal your team if you do it correctly. Here's an example I'm thinking of. If you're doing the other side, the dungeon, the other side, in the other side, just the initial outer ring before you go into one of the 4 zones, like one of the 4 wings of the dungeon, just in the outer ring, those big guys that patrol, and they cast rage. They cast that pulsing like rage thing that does a lot of damage on really high keys. That'll just kill people. Like once 2 or 3 pulses go out, it'll kill people. So what you can do is you can hold your Chain Harvest and get ready, and once he starts pulsing, 1, 2, he does 3 pulses. Everybody's at like a quarter HP. You press your juiced up Chain Harvest, and it's going to full heal everybody. And like those are moments that you need to look for when you're doing Mythic Plus, when you're in the Mythic Plus environment. These are the kinds of things we're talking about. Little micro decisions that you can make that will help your team to be successful, okay? Those are the 4 covenants. In terms of your DPS usage and cooldowns, those are the 4 covenants, and those are kind of the when you want to use those abilities, okay? Fae Transfusion, I'm just going to jump back to that really quick. It's also a huge thing. If you press Fae Transfusion, you're going to get the heal afterwards. If it's like a bursting week and you're killing a bunch of mobs and you kill 6 or 7 mobs at a time and they all give you 6 or 7 bursting stacks and now the whole group is ticking down very quickly, you can press that heal afterwards, right? You have about a 20-second window to use the huge heal from Fade Transfusion. Use that, guys. Bank on using it to help heal your team up and give your healer a better time. These are the little decisions you can make to make everything better for your healer. Here's something I want to talk about. I'm gonna move into legendaries really quick, and I'm gonna get this rolling once again. Let's keep this going. Boom, boom, boom. So you're gonna see we're getting close to the first boss. I'll talk about the first boss in a minute because there's actually an important some important cooldowns I want to talk about for Shaman. But I'm going to just talk really quickly here about legendaries. So Doomwins. When do you want to be using Doomwins as an enhancement shaman? If you were in a plague fall like this, you basically have to be using Doomwinds like on cooldown, which is every minute, right? You get debuffed for a minute after you use your Wind Fury totem and get the Doomwinds buff. You want to have Doomwinds, probably not for the Tormentors here, and on these slimes that are coming up, you would also probably not want to use. Actually, you might use Doomwinds right here because all these slimes are going to die, and then you still have to take care of the 2 ads that are on the sides, and that might take an entire minute. So I would pop Doomwinds right here. Even though you're right before the boss, this is how you can maximize your damage in a Mythic Plus, is by making these little micro decisions and making sure. I just popped my my huge shield thing there on my paladin. So that's my Kyrian ability. That would be Vesper Totem for Shaman. This would be a great time to use Vesper Totem here because you're about 40 seconds away from fighting the boss, and you can get really, really big value out of that Vesper Totem by killing all those slimes really quickly. This is a plus 15 dungeon that we're doing, by the way. This is the last plus 15 that we do. So these are the kinds of damage numbers that you want to think about. Another thing in Mythic Plus is that obviously the timers change. The dungeons get longer because the mobs last longer if you're doing higher keys on Mythic Plus. So you need to learn how long is it taking me to do, X pull over here, Y pull over here? How long does it take to kill these 2 outer mobs before I have to kill the boss? How long does it take to kill all the slimes plus these 2 guys before we fight the boss? You need to try to think about it. I think it's going to take longer than a minute, so I'm going to drop my 1-minute cooldowns, which would be Vesper Totem and even things like Doom Winds, right? That would be a great time to use that. So you have to be thinking dynamically about that all the time. When can I use my cooldowns? How long are these mobs going to last for on average? And that just takes experience of doing Mythic Plus and knowing that. Um, other um, legendaries that we're looking at using, we're going to be probably using Witch Doctor Bones quite a bit in 9.2, for example, going forward. I'm just going to pause this for a sec. Yeah, I'm just going to pause it for a sec. 9.2, we're probably going to be using Witch Doctor Bones, which means that our damage profile goes from being mountains and valleys with Doomwinds. Doomwinds is like huge spikes of AoE damage, going 25k, and then back down to like 6k for the rest of the dungeon, up to 25k, back down to 6k. Witch Doctor Bones legendary is like a flat ascending curve. It's always kind of going to be doing incremental damages higher and higher and higher as you go. The better you get at playing this build with Witch Doctor Bones, the higher it's going to be, and your single target damage is quite high. Something like 8 or 9k probably on single target damage, up to 10 or 11k if you have better gear, better weapons than me, and if you're playing things correctly, you can get a lot of damage out of the Witch Doctor Bones build. But again, this comes down to your composition. I want to talk just for a really quick second about composition. We need to get away from this idea that you must run a particular composition when it comes to a raid and then when it comes to a Mythic Plus environment. That is not true. You don't have to have a Demon Hunter and a Windwalker or something in your Mythic Plus group. You don't have to have anything. You can have whatever you want to have, and you can make it work. I promise you, there are enough tools available in this game to be able to punch through a Mythic Plus dungeon with whatever composition you want to. You just have to use the tools that you have. So that means utility, which we're going to get to in a minute, but it also means cooldown usages. And you need to be very cognizant of what classes do we have in this dungeon? What am I going to use as the shaman? What build should I go? For example, look in this dungeon that we're running right here. We've got a double Windwalker set up here, and then an Arms Warrior. Double Windwalker has disgusting AoE damage. If you were in a group with a double Windwalker, you don't need to do more AoE damage. They have it covered. They really do. If they're playing correctly, they have the AoE damage covered. So you could pivot into a single target build with the wolves, like I'm talking about, or maybe even the fire build with Primal Lava actuators, but probably the wolf build is going to be better. And that will help your team to balance out the DPS profile so that you're not doing like 50k DPS on trash packs and then 6k DPS on bosses because you're going to lose the dungeon that way. It also depends on if it's fortified or tyrannical, right? If it's a tyrannical week, you can really help your team out by focusing on single target damage with your build, with maybe a wolf build, or even just going Doomwins, but just focusing single target really, really hard. And making sure that you always have your totem available for boss fights and maybe for really difficult single target mobs on a fortified week, like in Theater of Pain, where you go through Zav's wing of Theater of Pain. It's like 3 mini bosses before you get to Zav himself. Those are all single target fights. If you were running double Windwalker Enhancement Shaman, the double Windwalkers would be able to take care of that patrolling pack with like the archers that murder you. They could AoE that down, but they need you to blow all your cooldowns on the single target guys because they're not going to have the damage to do that. So understand your DPS profile according to your group and understand that you can contribute to the group by changing the build that you're going to play. You don't always just have to play the default Doomwins, okay? That's just a really important thing to understand, especially as you get into the higher keys. As you start getting into high keys, you need to keep track of everybody's cooldowns. Keep track of things like power infusion. Who is the priest going to give power infusion to? Is it always going to be one person? No, it's going to be whoever has their cooldowns available. Okay. Hey, monk number one, do you have all your cooldowns available? Yep, I'm ready to go. Okay, I'm gonna PI you, and you're gonna blow up this pack, and you're gonna do 30k DPS, and the enhancement shaman's only going to do 7k DPS, but that's okay. That's not the point. That's not the reason why we're there, is to just do the most amount of damage. We understand at this point that I'm here to do a particular job. I'm here to do a particular thing. I'm going to bring my utility as an enhancement shaman, and on top of that, I'm going to do a lot of single target damage. Let's say if I'm doing the Witch Doctor Bones build, you need to start thinking of things in that way. Don't think of it as like, oh man, I'm not doing the most damage, so this sucks. It doesn't. It's just that right now, at whatever stage of the dungeon that you're in, it's not your time to shine, and your time to shine will be somewhere else, and your team will thank you for it because you were willing to do that for them. So, one important note on this boss here, on Glob Grog, is that he summons all those little ads, like the triple ads, and he summons one big ad. So it's obviously very helpful to have somebody like a hunter or even, obviously we have a monk here that paralyzes the big mob. I'm tanking the boss away from the little mobs as best I can, and then so we just paralyze the other big mob here. This is the utility for enhancement shaman. You have totems that can deal with this, right? You have cap totem that will stun the little ads, and you have the Earthbind totem, which can slow them by 40%. If you're playing Elemental Shaman here, it's actually also really, really helpful. You can thunder shock them. I forget what it's called. Thunderstorm. You drop your big lightning bolt on yourself and it pushes the enemies away. That's another tool that you can use on this fight. That's really the only tool you need to think about in terms of shaman on this particular fight, but it's very, very helpful. The higher the keys go on tyrannical in particular, you have to find a way to deal with these slimes, or else you are in major trouble and you're not going to kill the boss. So keep that in mind when you're climbing keys and the tools that you have at your disposal. If you're running Resto Shaman really quickly, you actually can get Earth Grab Totem, which will root them, right? It's not just like Earthbind where it slows them, it actually roots the slimes. So those triple slimes that are coming in, you can root all of them in place and then they're good to go. As long as nobody does damage to them, they are stuck there. And they won't get to the boss. So you can paralyze the big guy, root the small guys. That's your contribution as an enhancement shaman or as a resto shaman in particular. That would help you there. So those are kind of the legendaries I was thinking of. Primal Lava Actuator's legendary is, again, it's more consistent DPS. If you want to do the fire build, you're really talking about doing a more consistent DPS profile all across the board. You're not going to have huge spikes like Doomwins, but you are going to have the consistency. Okay. Let me talk really quickly about the Shaman kick, the Wind Shear. This is the best kick in the game. It's a 12-second cooldown. It it's a ranged kick, which is so huge. I can't tell you the number of times I've been in a dungeon and I've just like turned at the last second and kicked a mob while they were about to cast something really deadly. Like in Necrotic Wake, those guys at the beginning that drew the Drain Soul and they incapacitate you. Like you have so many tools for dealing with those guys. You have your kick, you have your Sundering in cap, you have a cap totem which can stun them. So you have a way to interrupt, and AoE stun. You have a kick that is like a ranged, low cooldown kick, best kick in the game. You have to utilize these tools as an enhancement shaman if you want to help your group. And a dungeon like Necrotic Wake is a really great example of that. But Wind Shear, you need to use it on cooldown. Use it as much as possible. It is your team will thank you so much. Another boss you can think about on using this is on the first boss of Theater of Pain. It's the triple boss, the trio in Theater of Pain. You can kick like Passerin or Sathel. They both do very dangerous casts on your group, and they usually jump away from the decapitator guy in the middle, and you can kick them to try and bring them back in with your ranged kick. That's a huge dungeon, or that's a huge boss, sorry, for Enhancement Shaman, where you can just be very useful to your team in grouping up those three mobs to make sure that something like a Windwalker can burst them all down with his Chi procs on his spinning crane kick, right? Very, very good. Let's shift over to survivability really quick. So I'm going to uh, talk just a little bit about survivability, and then we're going to talk about utility. And I've already touched on some of the utility stuff, but I'm going to get back to it in a minute. So survivability is a bit of a tough one for Enhancement Shaman. We don't have the best, like, just straight up damage reductions in the game. We have our one wall, which is a 40% DR, or Astral Shift, right? Which is fine. That's perfectly fine. But that's all we've got. It's a 1.5 minute cooldown. That's all we have. Think about something like a druid. A feral druid could shift into bear form. They immediately get like 10,000 health and a bunch of armor. On top of that, they have a 20% DR on barkskin, and they have a 50% DR on survival instincts, and they get the heals every time they spend 5 combo points. They can get like a free regrowth on themselves. So like something like a druid has a lot more survivability than enhancement shaman, but we do have some tools. We have our totem, healing stream totem. We have maelstrom infused healing surges. Don't be afraid to use a healing surge on yourself if you feel like you're about to die. That's a huge heal. Sometimes it can hit you for like 30 or 40k if it's maelstrom infused. The 5 stacks of maelstrom hitting that healing surge, very, very good, right? 3 out of the 4 Covenant abilities also have massive healing implications. Chain Harvest, huge heal. Fey Transfusion, huge heal afterwards. Vesper Totem has a lot of healing if you use a healing surge while you're standing inside of it. It actually is a surprising amount of healing, so don't count that out either. Um, very, very strong. Um, and then on top of that, you can actually take the Nature's Guardian talent, which is in the same row as Feral Lunge and Windrush. As you get into the higher Mythic Plus keys, I see a lot of Enhancement Shamans taking Nature's Guardian as an extra layer of survivability because they just don't have anything. They don't have like a cheat death, and Nature's Guardian is sort of a pseudo cheat death, so it's something that is definitely something to consider in the Mythic Plus environment as you get into keys that are like 18, 19, 20. If you're running those, you might want some more survivability. So that's that. Let's finish this off by talking about utility. I want to talk really quick. We covered Cap Totem. Um, I don't think it's worth taking the talent to reduce Cap Totem. I wish it was better, but it's just not a very good talent. You could take Earth Shield. That's something that you can take. I think it's pretty rare for enhancement shamans to take that, but this is again, it's another piece of utility that you can bring. You can pop an Earth Shield on yourself, and then when you do hit yourself with a Maelstrom infused healing surge, it's 20% stronger. So that's no joke. That's a pretty huge heal. If you really feel like you're gonna die, and maybe your healer isn't taking care of you as much as you maybe would want them to, then take Earth Shield. It's fine. The Earth Binding Totem that I talked about earlier, the 40% slow on Earthbind Totem, very, very good for spiteful weeks. If you guys have played Mythic Plus and you've had a spiteful week, it's really annoying and it can be very frustrating in your group to have to deal with because anytime a mob dies, the little spiteful clone comes out and then it starts chasing everybody around. You can just slow them all. If you're playing Resto Shaman, you can Earth grab them. You can just root them in place, and as long as your team ignores them and runs to the next pack, then you're good to go, and they'll just time out on their own. If you're playing Ellie Shaman, you can bounce them back with the Thunder ability again, which is just amazing. Those are all amazing tools that Shaman has to deal with something like a spiteful, if that's what's happening in that week, if that's the affix. Sundering is an amazing interrupt. It's an AoE interrupt. It's uncapped AoE. It'll hit every target that's in front of you. Use Sundering on cooldown and use it strategically to interrupt enemies. It's not a stun and it's not a kick, but it is an interrupt. And let me just say really quickly a little extra piece of knowledge on this ability is that let's say you're doing Necrotic Wake and you're at the first packs, those guys that do the Drain Soul and they incapacitate you. If they start casting that, before they're done casting it, if you hit them with Sundering, they will not cast it ever again. There's some mobs in this game that have spells that they cast, like Frostbolt or something, and if you interrupt them, they'll just start casting Frostbolt again because that's what their only ability. But these guys in Necrotic Wake that have the Drained Soul thing, that's like a special cast that they have, and it must have a cooldown because if you interrupt them with Sundering, they won't cast the Drain again. They'll go back to whatever their normal attack is. So you will successfully stop them from casting that ability, and then it'll put that ability on cooldown for like 10 more seconds, and then they'll cast it again later. But it's a very, very good interrupt for something like those mobs in particular. We have a Purge. Shaman has Purge, and this actually works on the spirits from the other side. So if you go into the wing, the Hakar wing of the other side, you start killing those trolls that are in there, and those spirits pop out. You can purge those off, and they'll go away. You can just purge them right away. They're kind of like the spiteful ads from the spiteful affix, right? They pop out and they start chasing people around. You can purge those away and they will disappear immediately. Huge, huge tool to have in really high mythic plus where those spirits will just start one-shotting people if they get close enough. So use purge in that dungeon. Tremor Totem, very, very important button for Shaman. Tremor Totem is like amazing. First of all, it works on one of the tormentors. It works on this tormentor right here, the one that we're facing right here. Watch this in the video. He does Wave of Terror right there. See that? If you're not standing close to your allies, then the Wave of Terror will fear you. You can counter that fear with Tremor Totem. If maybe you're playing with a group and it's somebody who's new and it's the first time doing a +10 dungeon this season, you can use Tremor Totem and it will save them. Okay. Or maybe somebody is standing just a little bit far away from the group and they didn't realize it. And they thought they were close enough. You can put Tremor Totem down and save them. So very, very awesome use there for that tormentor. Other uses also include the first boss of Mists of Tyrna Scythe. It's the tall flower tree thing with that small dude. I forget his name. But anyway, the first boss on Mists of Tyrna Scythe, if you're doing like a tyrannical mists, that boss is gonna last a long time, and he does an AoE fear on everybody. That's very dangerous because all those blue like missiles are coming out at the same time, hitting the ground. So you can drop Tremor Totem right before he does his fear, and everybody will get feared for like 1 second, and then they'll break free from the fear. So very important. Tremor Totem is awesome. It's a good tool that shamans have. You can use it on your keys to help save your team. Hex is another one. Hex is not always as useful. I haven't seen it used actually that much at all, but it's something you can use if you're trying to isolate a target. Maybe just hex one guy that you really don't want to have to deal with and then kill all the other guys that are in that pack. That's a tool that you have at your disposal. And the very last one is reincarnation, of course. All shamans have reincarn. You can use it to soak mechanics where you'll die and then you can just get right back up again. It's obviously it has a long cooldown, right? So it's not the most ideal thing, but um, it is something that you can use and it's something that you have at your disposal, which is awesome. I want to skip ahead to the last boss here. Oh, we actually killed. Where did we kill her? We did some more dungeons. Just like we did dungeon. Okay, look at this. We finished the dungeon here. This was funny. This was like our final raid boss here. I just want to show you guys this when we got the achievement. Where we're killing Margrave. We're getting her. But we did have Zefka, but that's okay. It was fun. We got her down and boom, everybody gets their achievements. We got our Deathwalker. Very, very cool. Everybody was very excited about that. But this is what I want to talk about, guys. I'm going to continue this series, and I'm going to the next couple of videos that I do, I'm going to actually get into some dungeons, some really high key dungeons with the shaman, and show you how to use some of this utility as well. I'm also going to be doing this for other classes, and I'm just going to talk again, do another video like this where I talk about how to use utility to make your team successful in a Mythic Plus dungeon. It's so huge that you start paying attention to these little things. When is my cap totem coming off cooldown? Can I use Sundering to interrupt this ability? Can I purge something that's going on in this thing right now? Can I purge a magic effect off of an enemy that stops them from doing tons of damage to my team? Can I deal with spiteful weeks? What if it's a sanguine week? Should I switch to elemental shaman so I can bounce all the enemies out of sanguine pools? That is so incredibly helpful to your group. And you need to be thinking about all these little things. It's not just about how much damage can I pump on a boss. It's about how do I help my team so that we are successful in pushing this key and we can continue to push keys higher and higher and higher. You want to think about your DPS cooldowns. When am I using them? How many seconds do I have before this next big encounter when I need to have my Ascendance up or I need to have my Vesper Totem up or my Fate Transfusion? Do I have enough time to use this right now and then I'll also have it up for the boss? Such an important skill to develop. As you do more and more Mythic Plus, you will develop it. You will get a sense for how long it takes to kill mobs and then how long you will have to use your cooldowns. DPS cooldowns in the context of your composition. What is our composition doing? If I'm running like a BM hunter and a shaman, maybe I'm running the feral spirit wolves druid. Shaman. Maybe I'm running the witch doctor bones on my shaman, and we've got a BM hunter. We are now the like single target kings. We are the consistent DPS. We don't have huge spikes, but we don't have low lows. We have that consistency. And then we're running with like a windwalker monk, and he's the one who's going to be picking up all that AOE slack that we're not giving the group. And now you have a balanced composition of damage, and you have to say to yourself, when do I use cooldowns? When's the monk gonna? Do you have cooldowns up? Okay, you use them on this pack. I'll use them on the next pack so that we can continue to advance this dungeon. You have to start thinking about things that way. And if you think about it that way within the context of the team, you will be so much more successful at using your DPS cooldowns correctly. I talked about the Covenant abilities and how powerful they are, when you should use them. And then the Shaman kick is so good. Don't forget to use your kick. It is so incredibly helpful. The trio boss and Theater of Pain, you can kick those guys. Survivability is okay. It's kind of a little scuffed. We have to, hopefully get better at the survivability for Shaman. But on top of that, we have a utility belt that is bigger than I think almost any other class in the game. There's so many things that we can do to help affect the success of our team in a key. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. We're going to continue the Dungeon Dynamics series. I'm going to keep doing videos moving forward, and I'm excited to talk more about this and have conversations with you guys in the comments, talking about how you think it's best that you can help your Mythic Plus team. And yeah, I'm just excited to get into it, guys. So let me know what you think about the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.